My title is Chief Regenerative Physician, Halvin Correctional Medical Bay, though by the end of that rotation, I had stopped believing the title meant what I thought it meant. The Kethrani Reform Council does not sentence with cages. We sentence with calibrated trauma, a single measured injury, delivered by the mordant array, scaled to the severity of the crime and the resilience of the species receiving it. A first offense theft on Urkai gets a compound fracture of the forearm. A capital offense on my own world gets the full skeletal cascade. Both legs, the pelvis, 6 ribs, time to heal over 140 days of supervised convalescence. It is, by every metric the council has ever measured, more humane than what came before it. The body remembers. The mind does not have to. Before you sentence a new species, you calibrate. You take a volunteer, usually a labor conscript working off a lesser debt, and you give them a measured injury under full monitoring, so the array has a curve to work from. The calibration ward at Halvin is a plain room, 3 diagnostic beds, a wall of scan displays, nothing dramatic about it. It is designed to be boring. Boring means the technology is trusted, and trusted technology is the whole point of the reform program. Punishment without cruelty, injury without improvisation, everything measured to a standard the condemned can read for themselves before they ever lie down. That was my job, that rotation. That was how I met Dara Voss. She was 31, an engineer serving out passage debt on a colony contract, unremarkable in every file note before mine. She read the consent forms twice, asked good questions about anesthesia thresholds, and when I told her the calibration injury would be a controlled fracture of the left tibia and 3 ribs, she asked if she could keep working afterward. I told her no. She shrugged and lay down on the table like she was getting a molar looked at. I want to be honest about what I expected. Humans were, at that point, an unclassified curiosity to us. A species we had traded with for 2 years and fought exactly 0 times, with no baseline injury data on file anywhere in the Concord archive. There had been idle talk in the physician's mess about them, the way there is always idle talk about a species nobody has calibrated yet. Someone had heard they ran hotter than most bipeds. Someone else had heard their homeworld gravity was unremarkable, which usually meant an unremarkable skeleton. None of it amounted to anything. I expected a routine. I expected a fracture, a scan, 6 to 9 weeks of union time, based on rough mass and bone density comparisons to similarly sized species, and a clean data point to file before my next rotation. The array does not miss. It struck her tibia and 3 ribs with the precision it strikes everyone with, registered the injury depth on my display in real time, and I watched the bones separate clean on the readout the way it is supposed to. Dara made a short, sharp sound, not a scream, more the sound of stubbing a toe hard on a doorframe, and then she breathed out and asked if it was over. It was over. That part went exactly as it should have. What did not go as it should have started, 9 hours later, on the first scheduled diagnostic pass. I pulled the scan, expecting hairline calcification, maybe early soft callus formation if her metabolism ran fast. Instead, I was looking at bridging bone, actual bridging, across a fracture that should have still been a raw gap held together by clamps and hope. I assumed instrument error and rescanned. Same result. I ran the panel a 3rd time on a different unit, checked the calibration seals on the scanner myself, and called in a 2nd technician to confirm the array hadn't been corrupted at the point of injury. It hadn't. The bone in Dara Voss's leg was healing at a rate with no precedent anywhere in the archive I could search, and I have access to every calibration record the Concord has ever filed, across 11 species. By the 18-hour mark, the ribs had gone from displaced to aligned with no surgical intervention, no bracing beyond what we had applied at intake. By the 30-hour mark, the tibia, which should have been, at minimum, 4 more weeks from load-bearing, held her full weight when she stood up unassisted to use the washroom, because she said, and I am quoting the intake log exactly, that she didn't want to bother anyone for a chair. I stopped sleeping properly after the 30-hour mark. I pulled the full archive of my own scans, hour by hour, and built the curve myself, because I did not trust anyone else's version of it. It was not a fast healer's curve. It was not even in the same shape as a fast healer's curve. Every other species I have ever calibrated shows a smooth, predictable acceleration, a slope you can chart. Dara Voss's tissue behaved like something had gone back and edited the injury out of the record, cleanly, the way you would correct a typo, rather than repairing it forward through time the way a body is supposed to. There was no scar tissue signature at all by the 5th day, not reduced, absent. I sat with her on the 6th day, when protocol would normally have kept her restricted to the ward for another month. She was doing calisthenics against the wall because she said the bed made her back stiff. I asked her, as clinically as I could manage, whether this had ever happened to her before. An injury healing faster than expected. She thought about it for a moment and said she had broken the same arm twice as a child, and it had never slowed her down for long, and that her mother used to say she healed like a stray dog. She did not say this like a boast. She said it the way you would mention you were left-handed. She asked if she could go back to her contract work now, since her leg felt fine, and seemed faintly embarrassed that she had taken up 6 days of my schedule for what she clearly considered nothing. I did not let her leave. I told her I needed one more scan for the record. What I actually needed was time to decide how to write the report, because I understood, sitting in that ward with her stretching against the wall like the whole thing had been an inconvenience to her calendar, that I was not looking at an unusually resilient patient. I was looking at the collapse of an entire branch of Concord penal theory, standing in front of me in a hospital gown, apologizing for the trouble she'd caused. I presented the data to the Reform Council 4 days later, in the same chamber where I had once presented calibration curves for 9 other species, without a single question asked beyond the routine ones. I had rebuilt the curve 6 times by then, hoping each version would look less impossible than the last. It never did. I showed them the archived scan sequence in full, hour by hour, bridging bone appearing on the display like something rewinding, rather than healing. The counselors leaning forward one by one, as the timestamp ticked past the point, where every other species in the record would still be swollen and immobile. I told them what the calibration meant in practice. A species that repairs catastrophic structural injury in under a week, without complication, without scarring, without any upper limit we had found yet, cannot be sentenced through the array. There is no injury severity we could calibrate that would hold. You cannot scale a punishment against a body that simply declines to keep it. The council chamber went very quiet, in the particular way it goes quiet when everyone in the room is doing the same arithmetic and arriving at the same number. One of the elder magistrates asked, carefully, whether this meant humans could not be hurt at all. I told him that was the wrong question. I told him humans can absolutely be hurt. Dara Voss had made a sound when the array struck her, same as anyone. What they could not be was kept hurt. There is a difference, and it is the only difference that matters to anyone designing a system that depends on an injury lasting long enough to mean something. I closed my own file on the calibration with a single line, because it was the only honest one I had left to write. We do not know how to make this species stay broken. Dara Voss finished her contract on schedule, 6 weeks later, on a leg that had been shattered, and had simply decided, on its own authority, not to remain that way. I still keep her intake scan and her day 5 scan side by side on my workstation. I look at them some mornings before the rest of the ward wakes. I have not calibrated a species since without checking, somewhere in that gap between the 2 images, for the same thing I found in hers.